Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for joining Hexis Cyber Solutions for our webinar called These Alerts Are Nuts, How to Protect Your Enterprise's Crown Jewels. As our thank you for joining this live session, all attendees will be sent a care package to include one of our themed t-shirts and a special snack. This webinar is being recorded for on-demand playback and will be posted on our website. This session should be about 27 minutes, and we'll accept questions at the end of the program. So if you'd like to submit a question, please use the chat function. I'm your nutty host, Anna Wayberg, and I lead the marketing here at Hexis. I'm joined by my colleague, Jeff Michael, our Senior Global Solutions Architect, who's going to share with you why ghost alerts are an issue and then the right way versus wrong way to address them. So without further delay, let me introduce our squirrely expert, Jeff Michael.
Hello, everyone, and good morning and good afternoon to those of you calling in from our European and South African offices. So today what I want to talk about is, we're not going to be randomly calling people and asking them these nuts, or we're not going to be running for president or anything like that. What we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the fatigue right now that people have around ghost alerts. The amount of time that they're spending troubleshooting alerts and looking at alerts and the information around that. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to talk about why is this an issue, what's kind of the history of the alerts, what's at risk. You got to stop chasing these ghosts. What's the wrong way to do it? And then lastly, what's the right way to do this? So everyone right now is just inundated with alerts. Alert me, stop, do this, do that. Everybody right now is just completely inundated with what they have and inundated with all the alerts that pop up. So they can't stop seeing the alerts. We're seeing alerts from Palo Alto. We're seeing alerts from FireEye. We're seeing, all these different alerts that are coming up. And so they absolutely, we're getting flooded with alerts. So what's the problem with that? The problem with that is it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. The problem with that is that as these alerts are coming up, you're not able to kind of figure out what's going on. You're not able to know what's happening with that. And so what ends up happening is alerts get ignored. So the issue's growing. We've seen this over and over, and I don't need to repeat this to you guys. The malware alerts, they're being chased down are just crazy right now. Alerts are slipping through very easily. 4% are actually only investigated. 19% are considered reliable. And so what we have to kind of move to is we kind of have to take these alerts and kind of move them all together to the point where we can actually take action and make some sense of it. So I've been doing this for almost 20 years. And I'm sure that everybody's seen this also. So when you go to like a trade show like RSA or you go to Black Hat or things like that, we've kind of seen this trend to where, originally everybody, it was all firewalls, and then it went to IDS, IPS, and then anomaly detection was the thing. And then a few years ago, everybody was ranting and raving about sandboxing. Sandboxing was what's going to fix everybody's problems. And sandboxing was what was going to be the next silver bullet in order to solve everything. And then it's now moved to endpoint protection. So there's a lot of people out there saying that they can detect malware at the endpoint, or they can, run microvisors, or, they're integrating with this and integrating with that. But, HawkEye G and Hexis, we honestly believe that we're the only vendor out there that's really going to help you with these ghost alerts and help you protect your network from both a endpoint and a host. And I'm going to kind of talk about that. But let's continue to talk about the problem. So what's the problem? You're getting all these ghost alerts that are coming in. And so these ghost alerts require human analysis. They require maybe a SIM integration, a third-party analyst. We have one particular customer that we've talked to, and this customer told us that they have 2 guys, and their whole job is to do nothing but chase ghost alerts from a sandboxing tool. And so these 2 guys, that's their whole job. So you got to figure, they're spending, $400,000 to $500,000 a year just chasing ghost alerts. The one thing that every network wants to push to is dramatically reducing their time to remediation. So if you're spending a lot of time chasing these ghost alerts, what you're doing is you're actually increasing your time to remediation. And you're also increasing the time that malware is on the network. You're increasing the man hours, that your people have to spend on it, and that's going to equal more infected systems. And then essentially what you're doing is you're then rinsing and repeating. So you're starting all over. The more infected systems, the more human analysis, the more integrations and things you have to do. And so that's what we're really going to focus on today, is kind of how we can help you with these ghost alerts and how we can help you with these things. So I mentioned remediation. So what is remediation? Well, I can tell you what it isn't. Remediation is not alerts, it's not logs, it's not sandboxes. So I asked somebody much more intelligent than me. I asked Mr. Webster of Webster's Dictionary what remediation actually is. So remediation is the reversal or stopping of damage to the environment. Remediation is the correction of something bad or defective. And so that's really where you want to get to. And you want to be able to get to taking these ghost alerts from your current security devices, adding them into an automated remediation tool, and then being able to remediate that threat so that the cycle's broken and the alerts no longer exist. So as I mentioned, been doing this for a long time. There's been kind of one trend that we've seen over the last 20 years. I don't care if you're Joe's Garage or if the U.S. government or any of those other locations. All of my customers have one thing in common. They have too many events to review. They have all these different vendor products that are screaming alerts at them. And as I mentioned before, only a small percentage of them are actually accurate. And then they have not enough skilled people to actually go through these alerts. The average retention time right now for IT organizations, according to a study I read, is right at 3 years. And so luckily for those of us in security, the job market is still very, very good and very hot, but that's not really good for an organization that wants continuity across how they're going to deploy their countermeasures or continuity across how they're going to handle these different ghost alerts. So this is a very interesting thing. When we talk about time to resolution, we talk about how we're going to handle these ghost alerts. So what's the time to compromise versus the time to discovery? So less than 20% of compromises were discovered in days. And one of the biggest reasons for this is the number of alerts that you're receiving. So you're receiving an alert from your sandboxing tool, and you're receiving an alert from your host. And the odds on you actually being able to correlate those together to say, hey, that's a version of Conflicker, or hey, that's ransomware right there. So I see the key exchange on the network. I see the encryption occurring, and I see this. So not having the actual logs and everything, not having the events integrated in, syncing together is one thing that's really causing this time to increase for organizations. So people started, as I mentioned before, sandboxing was one of the latest, greatest things. A few years ago, you went to every show and, about everybody's adopting sandboxing. So what's some of the effectiveness of sandboxing? Well, so this is percentage. 56% said, it's missed malware infections. It's difficult to manage. There is a place for sandboxing. By no means are we advocating rip and replace sandboxing or anything like that. What we're advocating, though, is to work smarter, not harder. So these different sandboxing tools, and I was an engineer very early on at FireEye, and one of my customers' biggest complaints, and this is what he told me. He said, Jeff, I feel like there's a ghost in the hallway. And I try to run up and grab that ghost and give it a big hug, but it ain't there. And he said, his guys are spending a lot of time because the sandbox is saying, hey, this system's infected. Well, the reason why the sandbox said it was infected was, the sandbox is running Adobe version 6, and that guy's system is running Adobe version 9. And so, as we mentioned, it kind of starts that whole cycle of, that system has downtime, and they actually said log into the host to verify if that's there, and kick the user off of the system and things like that. So there is a place for sandboxing, but no more is the day where the sandboxing alert, is God's gift to events. And, no more is the day where people are trusting that their sandboxing alerts 100%. So that's where, we provide that complete integration, and I'll show you that. But, talking about bad alerts, talking about bad things happening with bad alerts, let's take a look at poor Biff here. It says, guess what? After I go to the drugstore and go to the post office, I'm going to the vets to get tutored. Wait just a second. There you go. So anyway, he's not going to the vet to get tutored. By the time he gets back from the vet, he's going to be missing a couple really valuable things. Now, there may have been some alerts that Biff may have been able to pick up on. Maybe if Biff would have correlated the fact that, he heard his owner call the vet, and, he heard the owner, he saw the owner, put a bag of ice in the freezer, or whatever, Biff may have been able to correlate the fact that he probably didn't want to get in that car. And let alone, he probably didn't want to brag to his friend that he's going to the drugstore and the post office. So a lot of organizations are like this. They're ignoring alerts, and these alerts are being ignored, or that they're not being processed in a smart way. They're getting so many false positives. Biff's probably been in the car 100 times, and he's not thinking anything's going to happen this time. He's thinking he's going to the vet in the drugstore because they've processed so many false positives, they really don't know what's happening. And so a lot of organizations, just like just like this poor dog, you know, wake up in the morning and realize that they wake up a little sore and realize something's missing. So this dog obviously didn't understand the risk. So let's talk about the risk. You know, to be able to talk about risk, you got to kind of be able to understand what it is. Whenever I do a lot of public speaking, and one thing I always say is people always ask what risk is. And I say, to me, risk is what are you willing to lose? And so, you know, by not, you know, that's exactly why organizations are chasing after these ghost alerts, is because it's a cost of consequence. They have to chase after them because they have to find out that system's infected, even if it continues to cry wolf. So there's always a risk. You know, some of the, like I said, what are you willing to lose? It depends on what you are. If you're Joe's Garage, you don't want to lose your customer events. You know, you don't want to, if you're other enterprises, you don't want to lose your PII, your banking information, things like that. Like I said, I've been doing this a while, and I always thought this was funny where people try to come up with equations for what risk is. Is it threat times assets times vulnerabilities? So I had a buddy of mine that worked at a company here in Atlanta, and they paid one of the big 4 consulting firms $20,000 to come up with this equation of what risk is. To be honest with you, if you can actually use this to calculate risk, then you got too much free time. Because, as I mentioned, what risk really is risk is what you're willing to lose. But the interesting thing is most organizations, especially with their ghost alerts, they don't realize really what's at risk. I mean, they know their credit card numbers, social security card numbers, but, you know, it's kind of like you don't know what you got until you're gone, to quote an 80s song. That's exactly what ends up happening. And they also don't know how to measure the threat. So I really like this slide. I've been, you know, giving this slide for a while now. So the sharks versus coconuts theory. So, you know, there's movies right now about sharks. There's Sharknado and there's Jaws and all that stuff. I have yet to turn on the Discovery Channel and see Coconutnado or you know, people dying by coconuts. But statistically, now not this year in particular, but statistically, 2 people die a year from shark attacks and 10 people die a year from coconuts falling on their heads. So what does that mean to an organization? A lot of the organizations are spending so much time focusing on the shark. They're spending so much time spending all their efforts and everything, when really what's happening is these coconuts are falling all around them. And these coconuts, you know, are often ignored. But, you know, people are standing underneath a coconut tree, you know, and then boom, next thing you know, they're underneath the coconut tree. And so organizations right now, you know, you go to these trade shows and you see so many companies and so many things like that focusing on the shark. Remember, I always freaking hated the word APT. Every vendor, every booth, we APT. You know, most of the threats weren't advanced, most of them weren't persistent, but, you know, they still did APTs. When really, guys, it's not the sharks that are taking out the networks. The sharks are the low percentage. It's really the coconuts right now that are taking out the networks. It's really, you know, the small events that are masquerading. It's really, you know, ignored alerts. It's really, you know, these ghost alerts that are consuming the people's time. So as the ghost alerts consume people's time, other things are slipping through. Other coconuts are falling off of the tree is where it becomes. Another thing that I've seen that's really dramatically impacted people is that there's kind of this inner turmoil, this inner fighting in between organizations. So I'm a big Three Stooges fan. And if you think back to any of the Three Stooges episodes you ever saw, like when there was one where they tried to bake a cake. You know, a guy ended up with a pot on his head, a guy ended up with flour on his face, you know, somebody gets their eye poked out, somebody gets their hair pulled. That's the way a lot of organizations are. So they get these alerts and the desktop guys say, well, you know, that's a networking problem. The networking guys say, nope, that's a security problem. And so what ends up happening is they end up, you know, running around making funny sounds and, you know, pulling each other's hair, and, you know, it ends up not getting any resolution. You know, just like the Three Stooges, in not one episode did they ever get the cake made, or did they ever, you know, do what they started out to accomplish. They got so bogged down in the interaction between each other, and they got so bogged down in what was going on, you know, everything else just kind of went by. So how do we address this? Well, what we have to start doing is we have to stop chasing the ghost alerts. You're never going to catch a ghost. Even if you watch a lot of Discovery Channel and ghost hunters, they never catch them. And so we're never going to capture the ghost. Even though, like this ghost squirrel's in a cage, he can easily get out. So, you know, we have to be able to not be able to stop worrying about, you know, chasing them and being able to dramatically reduce them or stop them, or, you know, actually kind of debunk them. like they do on some of those ghost shows. So how do we go about doing that? Well, the way that people used to do it, and by the way, that is not me. I've never had that much hair, and I don't own my dot matrix printer anymore. But anyway, how do people do this? The common goal for ghost alerts was they're going to throw as much hardware as they can at it. They're going to dig through logs, find a good nerd with no social life, and that's still not hard. And when I say social life, I mean actual people, not virtual people. And then, just run around screaming, just like the Three Stooges. That's the way a lot of people end up with ghost alerts. We have a particular customer that, got on a helicopter and flew out, and, this machine was severely infected and got there, and it really wasn't. It was all ghost alerts. And so that's how we have to kind of stop doing. We have to kind of stop being this reactive to them and start being more proactive to them. So Hexis solves it. We solve it because we have this proprietary technology called ThreatSync. So what ThreatSync does is ThreatSync will actually pull in the information from your sandboxing technologies and other technologies coming up shortly. And this allows us to validate it. So the best analogy I can say is you're getting ready to go buy a car. And before you buy a car, you talk to your friends, you read Kelley Blue Book, you read Consumer Reports or whatever, and then you make the decision. So that's exactly what we're doing is we're pulling in threat feeds from like Palo Alto and FireEye and other places, and that becomes part of our decision matrix. Well, FireEye says it was infected and Palo Alto says it was infected, then, I'm going to trust that it's infected. And so that's allowing you to work smarter, not harder. So it's a combination of, being able to take in their alerts and being able to do actionable events on them on the host, killing the process, quarantining the file, things like that, actually killing the malware based upon that alert, but also verifying, hey, that's a ghost alert. There's no point for me to do anything to that. So we take all these things in, we put them into that magic matrix funnel, and then what that ends up happening is we score it. We listen to its input, we score it, we do the analytics on it, we fuse that all together, and what does that equal? That allows you to actually act smarter on these ghost alerts. And that allows us, based upon those decisions, to kill a process, quarantine a file, to be very surgical about this, because the last thing you want is somebody coming at your network with a sledgehammer. And then we can output that out. For full integration, once we perform those actions, we're fully CEF compliant, we're going to output into Splunk, into ArcSight, into any other big data, HawkEye AP, any other big data analytics product that you want. And then we make it easy to look at. So if you look at the screen right now, you'll see like the top line, HawkEye G host sensor saw it, the network sensor saw it, FireEye saw it, the Palo Alto saw it. So I'm taking that and looking at those ghost alerts and saying, well, that didn't happen. And so we're able to automatically go down to the host, and we do this automatically for you, to go down to the host and say, that system really isn't infected. And so that's the power, that's the strength of being able to integrate those alerts. We reduce the ghost alerts because we're looking at the host, we're looking at the network. So we're saving your time from dealing with those ghost alerts. Like I said, we integrate with FireEye and Palo Alto, and there's several other products out there that say they do what we do, but HawkEye G is the only one that really does the network detection, the full endpoint detection, and the automated response. So we're going to take this information from these ghost alerts and be able to do action upon them. So what's the weakest link on your network? When I worked at ISS many years ago here in Atlanta, we used to have a sledgehammer hanging on the wall. And underneath the sledgehammer, we had a plaque, and the plaque said End User Adjustment Tool. I wouldn't recommend that to you. Check your local state and regulatory laws. And in Georgia, we have a lot of things that are legal here. But, there is no silver bullet. There is no software or hardware that can replace human intelligence or lack thereof. The weakest link in any investigation, period, is the guy between the chair and the keyboard. But I will say that absolutely is the weakest link. But he's being dramatically hindered right now by being screamed at by these false alerts and, constantly chasing them after a while. So it's hard for him to make the decision on what to do. Do I listen to the alerts? Do I do that? And that's very hard in that decision-making process to actually fix this problem. What makes the decision-making process even harder also is his management often. Why does it seem as most decisions in my workplace are made by drunken lemurs? It says decisions are made by people who have time, not who have talent. And why are the talented people so busy? They're fixing problems made by people who have time. And so, that's kind of going back to that Three Stooges mentality. So, in just kind of a summary, The whole goal for this is, we want to talk to you about, dramatically reducing your time to remediation, dramatically reducing those number of ghost events that you're actually chasing after. You don't want to go nuts chasing after these events. You want to be able to act smartly and be able to, to be able to figure out what's going on with these events and to be able to correlate them instantly and find out what's going on. So you already have the alerts. You already have the pieces of the technology. You already have the security staff. What they're missing right now is they're missing the glue that's going to hold all those nuts together. So, I'm going to turn it back over to Anna, but, thank you guys very much for your time, and please chat any questions that you have, and Anna will present them to me.
Yep, absolutely. So thanks, Jeff. Now let's move on to our Q&A session here. Just as a reminder, as Jeff said, if you'd like to ask a question, please submit it to me via the chat function. So Jeff, our first question is from Chris. What success have you had identifying threats after you've processed alerts from FireEye and Palo Alto?
Yeah, we've actually had a lot of success with that, actually. I had a customer that had both FireEye and Palo Alto in line, and in the matter of just a couple of weeks, we found 139 different files. Now, that was we were only monitoring 20 different machines, but that was stuff that had already gotten through. And I know at other customers, we found things like Conficker, and we found things like ransomware and things like that that have gotten through the sandboxing technology. But because we're applying signatures and heuristics and monitoring both the sandbox and the network, we were able to detect that and also remediate that.
Okay, great. Our second question is from Todd. Can your product share security incidents with other big data SIMs?
Yeah, absolutely. We're fully CEF compliant, which is a common event format, which is, as most of you know, is what the format that ArcSight spearheaded a few years ago. So we can send all the events out via common event format. We're also fully STIX, which is a structured threat intelligence exchange. So we can actually send our IOCs via STIX. So, our goal is to reduce your time to remediation. If we were a siloed device, then we would not be reducing your time to remediation. We would be forcing you to log into a different screen and look at those alerts, or, log into your FireEye or Palo Alto and then log into your Splunk or your ArcSight or things like that. That's not our goal. Our goal is to get these bad binaries and to get these infections off of your network very quickly.
Okay. Let's see, I have one more question from Andrew. In terms of confirming FireEye alerts on the endpoint, is this just about searching for a specific indicator of compromise, like an MD5, or is there more to it?
There's a lot more to it. We don't just search for the MD5. So when FireEye or Palo Alto is telling us, this system's infected. So obviously they sometimes don't even know the file name, or the file name can often change when it hits the system. So we're just using their information as part of our threat score. So we're going to automatically increase that threat score. And another device said that was bad, so we're going to increase our threat score to a 6 or a 7 or an 8. And then if we actually verify it on the host using our either signatures or our heuristics, when we verify it on the host, then we're going to increase that threat level, and especially if we see it communicating outbound on the network. So no, it's not just simply a search for an MD5, because MD5s can change. We're actually looking at the behavior of it, how it behaves, and what it does.
Okay, I have one more question. Are you using honeypots to fake communication between an infected host and the command and control?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do use honeypots. So we call them bot traps. So a great example is if your system's infected, and let's say it tries to go out to badsite.com. So it tries to do the DNS resolution for badsite.com. What ends up happening is our honeypot will say, hey, I know that that's bad, and it will actually reply back with the DNS, reply back from the request saying, we're badsite.com. So what that allows our honeypot to do is it allows our honeypot to kind of engage with that communication. But the infected host also then thinks he's talking to his honeypot. So that allows us to very surgically and very strategically kill that process and quarantine the file that's talking to our own honeypot. We don't care what that file is. We don't care if it's called bad.exe or explorer.exe. We're going to know exactly which file and exactly which process is talking to our honeypot. So that allows us to very strategically do that. And by the way, from the aspect of ransomware, we've had great success with the ransomware doing that honeypot technology to where the ransomware actually does the key request. And then when it does the key request, we masquerade as the key server. And then that allows us to pinpoint the file and the process and actually kill that process and quarantine that file before the encryption ever occurs. And we've had cases to where that ransomware has gotten through, like I said, both FireEye and Palo Alto, and we stopped it before the encryption occurred.
Okay, great, thanks. Well, Jeff, that wraps up our Q&A. So at this point, I'd like to invite everyone to visit our website and sign up for your own demo to see HawkEye G in action. Just visit hexiscyber.com and click on the orange button that says Want a Demo. And please connect with us via LinkedIn or follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @Hexis_cyber. So in conclusion, you should receive your Hexis Care package in about 1 week. That'll include the super cute t-shirt that you see on the screen and some peanut snacks. Thank you everyone for your time. This concludes our webinar.